Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video. Myself and Slough today. I mean, a few weeks ago, Slough, we were literally sat here talking about Moyes and the contract extension and whether he should be getting one. We're now talking about Moyes' potential future at the club being in doubt. Now, it's been a weird few weeks. I mean, we've really took a turn for the worse in terms of our form, um, both European form and also in the league. Obviously, the most recent defeat away at Brentford. It's like 5 games without a win now. We're starting to struggle a little bit. Got 2 massive games coming up with Olympiacos and Forest in the next few days. So what's going on? Like, we've come back from the international break, not Christmas break, and it's just not clicking. It just doesn't seem to be working for us. Obviously, we beat Arsenal in the cup, but aside from that, we've been pretty poor. And that 3-2 defeat at Brentford after leading 2-1 kind of epitomized that. So what's your stance on the whole Moyes situation now? Because people are blaming Moyes, people are blaming the players. How do you kind of sit with everything that's kind of going wrong at the moment with the results on the pitch?
I think it's kind of a mix of both things. There's a lot of individual errors at the moment, and really sort of unforgivable misses. Let's face it, if Antonio leaves that for Ben Rama at 2-1, we're probably out of sight, and it's a different game. However, there's just lots of individual errors creeping into the side, and I think that against Brentford, we saw the sort of difference between having Alvarez in the squad and in the side, and not having him as an option to just sit in front of the centre backs, because Aguerd's been woefully out of form this season. He doesn't look that confident in duels. He is very suspect in the air, and that's not really something that I thought I'd be saying when we signed him. I was really impressed with him when he was in France, and he just seems a bit fish out of water at the moment. So we were hoping that maybe Mavropanos was the answer to that remedy, and he looks a bit, not unsure, but he just makes a couple of silly decisions. That headed own goal is not exactly filling us with confidence, but I do think that comes when you are trying to impress, and I feel like he's been trying to impress of late.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there's a kind of a mixture of stuff going on. Obviously, the defeat at Villa, very, very out of character of us. I mean, before that, it was defeats against Man City and Liverpool. We drew with Newcastle, which was a pretty good point, considering the form that they've been in this season. And then, Brentford, again, we pretty much lose every time we go to that stadium unless it's in the cup. So it's been a pretty tough run of fixtures, but I think losing to Everton kind of negates that. And that in and amongst what's happened is where you can start to question maybe what Moyes can do against the lower block teams, against the teams that are going to sit off of us, because it's going to be interesting to see how Olympiacos now come to our stadium on Thursday, because we were pretty woeful out there as well in the reverse fixture. So how are they going to approach that game? How is Moyes going to approach that game with quite a lot at stake now? I would say he'd probably like to have rested a few more players, but I think he's actually going to go quite strong. But we'll touch more on that in the preview. But in terms of Moyes' issues that he's had, yes, he's obviously had Paqueta, Alvarez suspended for the Brentford game, 2 massive misses. But that doesn't kind of excuse the likes of losing to Everton. And we've seen that over the years when we try to play that possession-based football, or teams just sit off, we really do struggle. And that's where I have slight reservations about Moyes' long-term future. It's already coming out in articles saying he might be offered a role higher up in the club at the end of the season, all this, etc. So I think once results, if results start going back well on the pitch, those rumors will stop. Because it really wasn't long ago, like I mentioned at the start of this video, that people were saying Moyes deserves that contract extension, and he's doing a really good job. But I mean, it's true. So how do you kind of sit with Moyes going forwards now? Because obviously we've got some favourable fixtures on paper now. I think the next 3 or 4 games are real, winnable games on paper, and games we should be winning if we're serious about finishing in the top 7, top 8 again this season and trying to get European football once again. So what does Moyes have to do for you now to kind of relieve that pressure on him? Because the pressure is building inevitably, and questions are going to start to be asked if this does not solve itself.
Well, I think the big, I mean, the big ask is getting maximum points from those games, and I would be looking at that as an essential, to be honest, because I do think the performance against Everton was dire. Let's be honest, it was really, really poor, and we've said repeatedly on this channel about how toothless we can look when Antonio isn't firing on all cylinders, and yet Moyes' answer to that is to bring on Ings, who has looked toothless in every single game he's played apart from the game against Notts Forest. So I am kind of worried in terms of just his decision making for substitutions. Everyone's wondering where the mystery man Cornet is, and if he's ever even going to get any chance again. And I think if you're Cornet, you're probably asking yourself, what have I done? But it's a tough one. There's a big sort of problem at the club in terms of players who just simply aren't good enough anymore. I've kind of said this for a while. There are players who could be squad players and would be good squad players, but simply are utilised as important or key members of the squad. And you look at someone like Benrahma, someone like Antonio, and even just keeping Cresswell. Like, he's not going to make it into any other team chasing the top 10. I don't think Antonio does either. I don't think Benrahma does. He's definitely not going to make it into their starting 11. And yet they're consistently picked, apart from Cresswell, obviously. We know why that is. But it's players like that who you just have to scratch your head at and think, well, we're making the decision not to upgrade on them. We're making the decision not to go out and try and sign alternatives. And it's just not good enough. I do worry about January because we're going to have a lot to do. And I think if Moyes is still in charge, which, I don't want him to go, because I think at times we've looked good this season. And we started the season so well that it's maybe that's just in the back of my mind, but I think the last few games have been terrible. Aston Villa, I don't really read too much into because you're coming into such a hot formed side, and let's face it, we were due a bit of a drubbing at some point. That's
this is now the crunch time for Moyes. These next sort of 5 games, both in the league and in Europe. Olympiacos, I think Palace, Burnley, Nottingham Forest, TSC. They're really winnable games before we even go to Spurs in December. So November's a massive month for Moyes, and it really only takes a really good run in that period to start the positive trail again and start to see signs that we're back in that top 8 mix. And we're still not far off it. We're still within touching distance if you look at the table and the points. So now is the time to pick up those points. I think this is where we're going to see whether Moyes is good enough with the players he's got, because he has still we have lost some players, but we have improved pretty much throughout the squad. We said it at the beginning of the season, the likes of Kudus is starting to show that now. Alvarez came in and pretty much straight away was performing. Ward-Prowse slightly dipped off recently, but his early form when he was playing higher up was really, really good. So he does have the options now. And, we're now looking at a point where we need to just make sure we qualify for Europe. That's one thing, because we don't want to start, risking that, which is why a win on Thursday against Olympiacos is massive. And then you go, 3 days later at home to Forest, where you just have to pick up 3 points, regardless of them, just beating Aston Villa at home. It's completely different. It's a team we should be beating if we have aspirations of finishing the top 8. So that's where my biggest question mark over Moyes and his future. I don't think he's in danger yet. Absolutely not. But this next 3 games, especially in the league, is going to be very, very important for him, because if he goes, those 3 games picking up 1 point or something like that, he's going to be in real trouble going into December.
I think the key thing that I want to see is Moyes making tough decisions in terms of who starts.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was critical of him for this exact reason, and the transfer happening potentially. Like, you know, one of my key points about James Ward-Prowse was the fact that when he doesn't have an anchor behind him, the midfield gets sliced through like a knife through butter. And that's what happened at Southampton time after time after time. And we saw that against Brentford. Let's be honest, he was really poor against Brentford. He has really dipped in form in the past kind of 3 games, I'd say. Now, look, that's not anything to really start worrying about. But as a manager, you need to be able to make a tough decision and say, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move Paqueta centrally, and I'm going to put Ben Rama out wide instead of shoehorning Paqueta into the side, which I kind of feel like we have been doing. And you need to go into these games picking your strongest 11. And, you know, we hear so many times about pick a winning side. Well, we've not won in a few games, and you need to make changes. So I think, apart from a few, you know, safe players in there, like, you know, Alvarez has been fantastic, Paqueta's been fantastic, Emerson's been fantastic, Bowen, absolutely electric form this season. You know, he's been sensational. I think they're kind of the undroppable elements of the squad. I think apart from them and Zuma, you have to be looking at it and saying, these places are up for grabs. And, you know, players like Aguerd, if you're going to keep making errors, well, I'm going to drop you. And how's that going to affect your AFCON chances? You know, I mean, Morocco, he might not have that much contention, but I think you need to be saying to him, look, you need to get yourself informed. You need to sort yourself out. And in terms of on that wing, for Ben Rama, I would be saying, look, impress me, or else January's coming up. And if we get a good offer, I'm afraid I'm listening to it. So those tough decisions are the ones that I really want to see from Moyes going forward. It's now the time for him to really show us why he deserves a new contract, or show us why he deserves that backing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this is, like we mentioned, it's going to be a really crucial November for Moyes. So let us know in the comments what you think of the whole situation. Do you think Moyes is in danger? Do you think we should stick with him? Yeah, let us know in the comments, and leave a like on the video if you did enjoy. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. And Sloth, one thing for us left to say.
Go on, you
Go on,
irons.
you irons.